Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, we're going to do some various odd jobs and talk about some interesting plants. One of the jobs we have going on is, as you're watching this video, it's about our average last frost date here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and it's time to put the vegetable garden in. And our vegetable garden has actually been full of shrubs all winter that were from containers that we were trying to overwinter. So the big process here is getting the vegetable garden emptied and recomposted and ready for some of the things, and then some other annual borders as well we'll be prepping as part of this video. This is just an absolutely fantastic native plant. This is Bignonia capreolata, but this particular one is named Jekyll, and Dr. Durr and his wife noticed this kind of more orange variety on Jekyll Island while they were riding their bicycles, is the story, and he got cuttings on it, or seed, I actually don't know, I'm assuming cuttings, and came back and introduced this. Again, the variety is Jekyll. It has the bright orange. One thing about Bignonia, it's a great native vine, but it does have tendrils. So that means it'll attach itself to any wood or stone or brick or anything like that. That's not the kind of vine I probably want on my house, but it will. If you had a brick wall or a stone wall or something like that and you wanted a vine to attach to it where you would, it just kind of do it on its own, Bignonia is definitely for you. We just have it on this chain link fence that adjoins our neighbor's property. I got this as a clearance plant. This is one of those, you just occasionally, Lowe's or Depot will have something that's just, wildly interesting. And this was one, it's not a plant that I would have thought I'd found there. Maybe I find a Bignonia, but I would not think I would have found one that's, got an interesting history and interesting name and all that. But we got this as a clearance plant. It was originally 20 bucks, and I think we got it for $6 or $7. It's climbed the fence pretty quickly. This is the first season it's putting on a show. Next year, it will just completely have covered this fence, and I'll probably have to control it off my neighbor's building over here at some point. It's pretty fast growing once it gets its feet under. But again, it's got that brighter orange coloration. I'm interested in, we have, these types of flowers like this are definitely welcoming hummingbirds back home. This is blooming a little early. Typically, we would say that Bignonia blooms in May. Here we are at the very beginning of April, and this thing's gonna be in bloom. I've seen a couple hummingbirds, but it's still a little bit early for them to be out and about. But something cheats the system on this, and I've talked about this with salvia and other things. There's something drilling a hole into the flower and going down there and enjoying the inside of that flower. A lot of times bumblebees will do that. They'll go to the flowers on salvias and drill a hole. They can't reach down into it all the way to the depths of that flower that was designed for a bird or a hummingbird's tongue. So they just cheat the system and drill a hole back toward the back of it. Interesting. That's Jekyll Bignonia. We definitely want to show off the Shasta viburnum in basically full flower. You can see they're out. The branching on this is very horizontal. You can see it layered going up, and then the flowers basically come up on a little vertical stem. And they have the outer part of the flower has this cluster. These are sterile, individual sterile flowers along the outside, and then the fertile flowers are in the middle, which will become a red fruit that eventually matures to black. And so it's super, super showy. Also gets a burgundy red fall color. Great plant. You'll typically see, you know, that it reaches 10, 12 feet in height, something like that, and pretty wide. You can see how it's layered, you know, and it's pretty wide, and it's pretty wide for this garden here in Raleigh, which is small. But we've seen them 20 feet tall. Steph has, her sister has one up in Connecticut that's probably 20 feet tall. Great for screening, but it does lose its leaves in the wintertime. We've limbed this one up. It's really the only way we felt like we could keep it in this garden where we're trying to have so many things in this garden. A lot of the things we've selected are very upright and narrow, and if they get wide, we've limbed them up into trees, and that's what we've done with this one. And I'll go under here and continue to lift this up in the future. One big time warning about this plant: it's the time to prune it would be after it flowers, of course, but you'd be sacrificing, you know, any kind of fruit you'd get on it later in the year, and you'd also be sacrificing the flowers on it the next year. We pruned it hard, got it under control, lifted it up, kind of got it into the shape it is now, but it did not flower hardly at all last season. So it's basically, this is 2 years removed from a hard pruning. Okay, so there are plants out there in the world that it's receptive to pruning, and I've been able to turn it into what looks a really beautiful plant. And I had some drone footage in this same video of doing this front lawn area. If it hasn't come up in the video, it's about to, or it's already has. And you can see this thing from top down. It's incredibly, incredibly showy. But put it in a place where it can, you know, have the room where you don't have to be pruning on it all the time, or you will not get this number of flowers on it. Over here, we have the Rosalinda Indian Hawthorn. I've already shown it in a video probably last week as you're watching this, but I wanted to show it in absolute peak full bloom. So this is, at the time we filmed it, it didn't have its full color going at that time. This is the most fragrant thing in the world. Really, you can see our path comes in here and turns right and comes over here. I'm gonna have to continue to lift this side of the plant up so that otherwise it's gonna come all the way to here. So I have to continue to work on it, especially this one side over here, to not be blocking the path in the future. Here's one of our great native trees. This is Cyananthus virginicus, or the American fringe tree. This is not a great example of one, really. They tend to grow much fuller than this, and oftentimes are kept kind of shrubby, the ones we see around the neighborhood. This one's in front of a school, and it's just in a very, very dry patch between some concrete here. One thing about this tree is it's actually native to lowland areas. So it's native to the southeast United States, but it's native in kind of more moist conditions. So when we bring it into our urban, suburban spaces like this and plant it on a mound and surround it by concrete, it's not necessarily the best performing tree in those conditions. But it was one of our great natives, and despite it being native just to the southeast United States. It's actually, most people watching can grow it. It's very, very cold hardy. Has these amazing frilly flowers, almost witch hazel-like flowers with four little fringy little parts on each flower. Gets amazing fall color, great gold fall color. And if you're looking to design with these and you have other deciduous plants with it, some of our native viburnum turn great oranges and red colors in the fall, and these fall color looks great together. They tend to bloom a little later than this, more toward May, but here we are in the first few days of April and it's in full flower. It's kind of true of this year. Most things are blooming out pretty early, but again, it's one of our great natives here to the southeast United States. One of the things we got accomplished here was getting our containers filled and then putting a thriller in them. So we have most of the things we have as kind of the centerpiece of our containers can stay in the containers year round without us having to worry about them too much. This past fall, if you've been watching the channel for any period of time, we actually went out of town for 2 straight months and we took all of our container plants and we put them in the ground. I've used that opportunity. Actually, Steph's pointing at herself. She actually is the one that put them in the ground, and that is true. We took that opportunity though to dump the container. She also did that. The soil that we use in containers, whether it be peat moss based or compost based or whatever the heck kind of thing we're using in these containers, does run out of steam over time. And typically what we'll do, and what we'll do next year, the next time around, we'll just take out some soil and replace it. And we'll do that for 2-3 seasons, 2-3 years before we change it out completely. But some portion of it needs to be changed out every year. We use the Soil Cube veggie mix, which is, it's a cubic yard bag that they delivered to us. The difference between the veggie mix and the regular compost humus from Soil Cube is the veggie mix has a bit of bark in it, and that bark helps us drain these containers a bit. It is really rich, beautiful. So I haven't used it yet, but it looks absolutely fantastic, and it's kind of how I make material for our containers. Typically, I'll buy compost and then I'll mix it with some bark to make it slightly lighter and to have the compost drain a little bit better. Basically, that's what the bark is in there for. So excited to use it for the first time. It looks like great material, and it kept me from having to mix it myself. We just put them back here on this path because we're still a week away from our average last frost date. So we'll come back in here to each of these containers and we'll add annuals that we've either started from seed or some that we bought from Big Bloomers, if you watched the video from visiting Big Bloomers a week or so ago. So this will be next week sometime, and we'll go through each of the plants that's in the containers. Some very interesting things, some things we've created, topiaries I've created over time, but we'll go through each of these individually coming up in a video next week. But it's actually less containers. This probably looks like a lot of containers, but it's actually less, believe it or not, less containers, half as many as we probably did last year. And that's with intent, because we'll, want to do some traveling, and this will be an easier number to kind of gather up and allow somebody to water in our absence for us. That's the plan on that. Here's another one of our great natives. This is Calycanthus floridus. This particular variety is called Athens. It was a selection by Dr. Durr. So Dr. Durr, being at UGA in Athens, Georgia, named this one Athens. It's got it's considered a yellow flower, but it starts off green like this and it stays on the greener, kind of slightly greener hue. I find this to be one of the most fragrant of the, this plant has so many common names, and it depends on where you are or where you're from. Sweet Betsy is one of the most common names. You'll hear it called Sweet Booby and all kinds of things. Apparently, a long time ago, people would put these flowers in their drawers or in their pockets. It was like a perfume, basically a perfume you could use. One thing I'll say about Calycanthus, it is, again, one of our great natives. It has tremendous fall color, gold fall color on it, typically. Great flowers. Buy this plant in full bloom. This is one of the rare plants, I would say. Definitely buy it in full bloom, or when it has open flowers on it, because frequently these aren't fragrant. And also the timing of the day. So this morning, at 7:30 in the morning. There's basically no fragrance. I can walk back through here at 5 in the afternoon with the dogs after the school is let out and everybody's gone home, and the whole entire space out here smells like apple. It's like an interesting, people will say that it smells like all kinds of things, but to me it always smelled like applesauce. It was what I would relate it to. It's not the showiest flower in the world, but there are, the straight Calacanthus floridus has, red flowers, and they're a little bit more showy. But I find that as a percentage of the plants that I walk by, this one more often than not is fragrant. Again, though, there are ones that just for whatever reason, I don't know how we've managed to do it, but some of them just aren't fragrant. This one, of course, has a crepe myrtle growing up through the middle of it somehow. But this is, again, one of our great natives with great fragrance and great history to folks in the Southeast. It will colonize, and you'll see this down below here. You can choose to dig those up and, pot them in other areas in your garden, but just keep in mind, this is a plant, and a lot of our native plants will do this. They will colonize over time. The other big thing from this video is if you go back to the beginning of this series of videos, 4 years of videos here in this garden in Raleigh, I laid out, those first 4 videos are probably pretty good to watch because I laid out how the paths and everything would work here in this garden from overhead with the drone. And I put in 2 lawn areas. So we have a lawn area back here behind the screen porch, and we have a lawn area in the front garden, and we sodded them. And then I realized how little I wanted to maintain any turf at all, and I just allowed it to kind of fade into the background. And so that's gone away. And if you're looking down now from the drone in the front garden, I painted a path onto the ground. Then we used this same veggie mix compost that we used in the containers back here to create 2 new bed spaces in the front garden. It actually is just an expansion of existing beds. There's going to be a bench in front of the evergreen dogwood that's in the front garden. So that's part of the design plan. And then we're going to have some small annual spaces, and then perennials, and then a few extra shrubs are going to be added into that space. But that was part of our redesign for this season, was that front garden space. So excited to get on top of that, and it's done. There is no more turf in this garden. And again, people would think I'm kind of anti-turf or something. I'm not at all. I've just always been kind of turf with a purpose. And since we don't have young kids, and we actually have access to this little side lot that the city owns for the dogs to be in that space if we need, grassy space for them, we really just didn't need any turf in this garden. So that's more what it is with me, is just not anti-turf. It's just like, explain why you mowing the grass every weekend. If you have young kids, all kinds of activities that I love to do on lawns, just like everybody else. But for us in this garden here in Raleigh, we chose to eliminate it. We have entertainment. We're going to have an entertainment space in the front garden and a pollinator garden out in the front. So thank you guys so much for following along with the channel. We really appreciate it. Lots more videos upcoming and content that's similar to this, where it's a mixed bag of odd jobs in the garden and beautiful things that in our 3rd or 4th year are really showing off here in the Raleigh garden. Thanks for watching.